Okay, so just a reminder about the 3 types of white matter nerve fibers that we talked about in the brain. We have 3 different kinds. So the first is the association fibers, which are connecting one area within the same hemisphere together. So association fibers, little tiny, they're short. So they're within the same hemisphere, even possibly within the same lobe. Okay? And then you have commissural fibers, and the best example would be our corpus callosum. And the corpus callosum is what connects the right and left hemispheres together. And then lastly, we have the projection fibers, which are taking information. So for example, this is the anterior view, so if we turn ourselves around, that's the left side, that's the right side. Okay. Anyway, so information from one side of the brain, so the left side of the brain, travels down and crosses over in the brain stem. That name for fibers crossing over is what? What's the term we use for that? It starts with a D. It's like desiccate. So that means crossing over. And then long myelinated nerve fibers from the right side also desiccate at that same place. So they cross at the brainstem and then travel down the opposite side of the spinal cord. Okay, and I will just erase this because, yes, why not? Okay, so 3 functional principles of the cerebrum. So we're kind of moving on to a different little section here. So first of all, 1, each hemisphere, the right or the left, is going to receive sensory information, and it's going to send motor responses to the body, and specifically to the opposite side of the body. Okay? The second one, 2 hemispheres have different functions, indeed, and we'll talk about the different functions of the right and left hemisphere. So they have different functions, but it physically, anatomically looks the same. Okay? So structures are alike with different functions. And then last, there is a correspondence between function and region of the, so there's a connection between the function of a specific region of the brain. Right there. I don't think I said that very well. I'm sorry. So let me try again. We talked before about the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. So the precentral gyrus is the motor cortex, and the postcentral gyrus is the somatosensory cortex. Those 2 structures, if you just looked at them, the anatomy, they look the same, but the functions that happen within those 2 regions are very different. So the region that you find them in, it's going to vary from person to person. So an example to think of is sometimes when they do brain surgery, after they initially, get part of the skull off and stuff, they'll excuse me, they'll test, if they're trying to excise a tumor, they want to make sure they're not removing tissue that is necessary for a specific function, or they test certain parts of the brain by stimulating it. And sometimes they have to wake up the patient so they're awake, but still in surgery, to ask them questions, or can you feel certain things? And so that helps the doctor pinpoint where exactly that problem is, because it could be slightly off on one person compared to someone else. So they're in a general region, but they're not precisely the same on every person. Does that make sense? So when we look at the brain, it's like a glob of bleh. And so we know the region, we don't know the exact pinpointed location for specific function, and it is going to vary depending on the person. Sorry, all that writing, we'll erase that. Okay, so those 2 areas I just mentioned, the precentral gyrus and the postcentral gyrus. So the motor area is found within the precentral gyrus. It's the last, or the most posterior portion of the frontal lobe. This is responsible for voluntary movements. Okay? And so that region we call the primary motor cortex. And within that area, we have a special kind of cells. And this is not to be confused with Purkinje cells, which you talked about on Friday. So the Purkinje cells are found in the cerebellum, okay, and they are the largest cells in the nervous system. However, we have pyramidal cells that are different, and pyramidal cells are found in the primary motor cortex. Okay, so if I ask you about pyramidal cells, the really only thing that I would ask you is where do we find them? Make sure you know the difference between pyramidal and Purkinje. Don't get those confused. It doesn't help that they both start with P. I'm sorry. Moving to sensory areas, so that would be our post-central gyrus. Okay, and this is the very first gyrus or little hill of the parietal lobe, right behind the precentral gyrus. So this is I'm so sorry. So this is our primary sensory cortex, where information is brought in and then it is interpreted. Okay? And so remember, it is the primary sensory cortex, and the type of senses it receives, all but one is as just what we call a general sense. So touch, pressure, pain, temperature, vibration. But taste is considered a special sense. So typically we'd say the majority of the sensory cortex is for general general body sensation, pain, temperature, all that fun stuff, but then we throw in one special sense with it. Okay, good man, I'm going to erase this. This is from this morning. Go erase. Okay. All right. So we are going to talk about some different regions here of the brain. So I'll start with the primary motor cortex. So just to see it in a picture, the primary motor cortex is this lovely folded gyrus right before our central sulcus. So this is our primary motor cortex. Okay. If we were to look at our sensory cortex, which is right after or posterior to the central sulcus, it's the first part of the parietal lobe. It's this lovely gyrus right here. Okay. A couple others that are interesting is we have, let's see, what do we want to do? Okay. Next we have a region, the visual cortex, and I am coloring this in green, so sorry if I just wanted to match colors. So it's this most posterior region of the occipital lobe, okay? And then auditory cortex, this little yellow region here, you see that? And if we kind of thought about where our brain is in our skull, that auditory cortex is very close to where your ears actually are. So that one makes a lot of sense because it's like right where your ears are. Pardon me. Olfactory cortex, it's kind of neat. You have to look inside between two lobes, between the frontal and temporal lobe, and deep inside we have our olfactory cortex. And what would that be receiving information from? Sense of smell. So, yes, good. He picked up what I was throwing down. Excellent. Okay. Last but not least is the gustatory cortex. Does anybody have a guess for what sense that is for? Taste, yeah, exactly. And so that's kind of deep inside, and it looks like it's deep inside the frontal lobe. Yes. Okay, and so you can also see with these, there are association areas. So for example, if we're looking at the parietal lobe here, here's our somatosensory cortex, and everything else is light blue. That is what we would call our sensory association area. And so we'll talk about what these association areas are doing. But all of these cortexes, or cortexi, I don't know, have association areas. So visual has a visual association area there. Auditory, there's its auditory association area. So association areas are important. So important that we're going to talk about them right here. Aha! All right. So with these association areas, we saw them on the previous picture. What they do is they monitor the information that goes to that sensory cortex region, okay? And it will interpret the information that was brought to the cortex. So let's say you had a sensation of, I'm cold in here, because thermoreceptors are one of them, and I'm sorry. Excuse me. Okay, so it's cold in here. You would trigger those thermoreceptors, and the information would go to the sensory cortex, and then it's going to be interpreted in the association area, which would then you would then perceive that you are cold, and then your body would have the appropriate autonomic responses, like goosebumps and shivering. Okay. Visual association area. This is from the visual cortex, like we talked about the previous slide. Auditory, same, it's part of the processing information from the auditory cortex. And then if we talk about the somatic motor association area, this monitors and coordinates and helps interpret motor responses to a stimulus, for example. So motor responses, most importantly, I want to point out these motor responses in the association area are learned movements. These are not talking about reflexes. So, are you doing anything right now that requires a learned movement? Any of you? Actually, nobody's writing right now. Okay. Well, okay. She's right behind her. So writing is a learned movement, right? Or typing, learning how to type on a computer. That's not easy. I had to take. Did you guys even have a computer class? Yeah, you did. You went through that. My computer classes were on the old Commodore 64s. Yeah, you guys are way too young for that. It's like the first desktop computer ever, mass produced, like in mid-early 80s, like 84 or so. It's like the first Apple. They're not super complicated. Okay, so coordinating those motor responses, those learned motor responses. Or if you play sports, for example, being able to be coordinated in throwing or catching a ball or anything like that, or any instrument you do, or so just those coordinated responses. Or it could even be a learned movement, how to curl our hair. That's a learned movement. How many times did you burn yourself before you did it, right? Okay. 2 important areas in addition to the ones I told you about already. We have one that is called the general interpretive area, also known as the Wernicke's area. The Wernicke's area has been commonly used in the past. And then we also have what we call the speech center, which is often referred to as Broca's area. Okay, both of these are only found on the left hemisphere of the brain. Okay. Which is another thing. We said that different regions, even though they may look alike, may not have the exact same function. So Wernicke's area is here, this lovely purple area. Kind of looks like you have a little junction between your your temporal lobe, parietal, and maybe a tiny bit of occipital. So this is general association. What happens here? Receives information from all sensory association areas and coordinates visual and auditory memories. Okay, so it's involved with memories, and it receives information from the other association areas. Okay. Auditory memories. So, can you think of an auditory memory? Do you guys have an auditory memory? Like of a certain sound? I see heads. I can't think of one for myself at the moment. I can think of my friend. She put a bell by her door. It's kind of like Pavlov's dog experiment. But the dog figured out if it rings the bell, she will come open the door. So for her, the bell is the dog needs to go out. That's not the best example in the world. I know that. But some of us have memories. Okay, for me, like the sound of a thundering waterfall. I call Yosemite my second home, and I have that sound. I know what it sounds like. Maybe that's an example for you. The speech center, also found in the left hemisphere only, is this lovely region here. And this is also, or used to be called the Broca's area. And I'm sorry, it kind of covered part of this, but what it says is it's coordinating all vocalization. So this helps you form the words that you want to say, and it helps you actually vocalize those words so it doesn't come out as gibberish. So if someone did have damage to this speech center, it may affect their ability to speak or be understood. And these two areas do have to work together. Okay. Sorry. All right, so a little bit of the differences between the right and left hemisphere. So there are differences in the function, and some of the regions there's just very different functions between the right and left hemisphere. They say that most people are considered left-brained, but there are still plenty of people who are also right-brained. And so that means left brain, the left hemisphere is more dominant. Or right brain, the right hemisphere is more dominant. That's kind of what they're referring to. So the most common one, as we said, is the left brain. And so the left brain is really good at things like school, reading, writing, math. So these are like logic types of things, analyzing, making decisions, speech, language. Because remember, the speech center is on the left hemisphere only. That's your Broca's. And language is also in the left hemisphere only. So if we back up, one thing I probably didn't explain very well is if this general interpretive area is damaged, a person would have a hard time understanding speech. Okay? So people are talking to them and they cannot convert those words to anything meaningful. Because it's part of that is auditory. And so if either one of those two regions, the speech center or general interpretive area, are damaged, it affects your ability to communicate vocally. Okay, right hemisphere has a stronger grasp on senses, so more of a sensory type of side, recognition. There's more, but it got cut off. More artistic. That's something they didn't say, but I know is true. So we kind of have, they are different. We have like this logical, great decision making. These are the facts kind of side of the brain. And then we have the other brain that has to feel with senses and emotion, knowing and recognizing people, more abstract types of things. Okay. So this is a fun, erasing. This is a fun illustration to kind of help us see the differences between the right and left hemisphere. Visually, just looking at the brain, not the colors or the hands there. The structures, everything looks exactly the same, but what's happening in them is different, okay? So we're just going to kind of look through here real quick. So first of all, speech center, not present on the right side. So this is the left, this is the right. So this is unique. Speech center, Broca's area, just a reminder. It's your speech center. The next one that is different. Ooh, hope that wasn't a phone. Oh, it was. I hope it's okay. Writing is a good skill in the left hemisphere. Okay. There is auditory cortex on both sides. Okay. And then we only have that general interpretive area on the left side. Language, math, and calculations. Visual cortex on both sides. Great. Okay, so what do we have on the right that is unique? Spatial and visual analysis. So depth perception, actually being able to gauge the space properly with your vision. Okay, another thing that's unique on the right, analysis by touch. Okay, and so the senses, as we saw in the previous slide, senses are one of the stronger suits of the right hemisphere. Well, because they are, it makes sense that your senses, if this is the right hemisphere is more dominant, your senses are going to be, you're going to be using them more. I told this morning's class, someone who's right-brained, if they were blind, it would be beneficial to them because their senses would be heightened and it'd be easier to do tactile things. Not to sound like some people should be blind. I'm just saying the senses are heightened or used more, like the tactile bit. Okay. Both have the prefrontal cortex. And then the last structure to point out, the corpus callosum. Those are the tracts of the white matter that connect the right and left hemisphere together. Now, there's some cases where the corpus callosum is severed. Have you guys heard of that before? Usually this happens when it's done when it absolutely has to be done, but in some cases to cure severe epilepsy. For some reason, that disrupts the seizures if you sever the corpus callosum. And in some extreme cases, they can even remove a whole half of the brain, take the whole hemisphere out. One of my friend's daughters went through that surgery when she was about 6. And when you go into a surgery like that, you don't know how they're gonna come out of the surgery. The brain is malleable. It can be trained to do things that maybe that side of the brain didn't do before, and it's usually most successful in the younger people. So what would it be like if your corpus callosum was severed? There's a really great Gary Larson cartoon. I need to find it. But it shows this man sitting at a desk, and he's writing with his right hand on a piece of paper, and his other hand is throwing a ball up and down. Okay? And on the paper, the right hand is writing to-do list, kill the left hand. And so it kind of goes with that saying, the right hand doesn't know what the left hand is doing. That's literally what happens with people who've had that corpus callosum severed, because you can't send the information back and forth, what's going on with this side of the body versus this side of the body. And so people have had cases where one side of the body is like out of control because of that severing. Like hitting themselves, not even kidding. So it's a very interesting, we really need both. We can survive with one. We can have complications if we sever it, but we can survive again. But again, the connection between the two is really important. Okay, let me erase my these things. Now, talking about different brain waves. Okay, nobody's asleep right now, but they're close. Okay, 4 categories. Alpha. Healthy awake adults at rest with eyes closed. What I plan to do soon, right before I go to sleep. So the best example is maybe when you just laid down to go to bed, close your eyes, you're not asleep yet, but you're resting. That would be a good example of when that would happen. Your brain would be emitting alpha waves. And then the second is beta waves. So these are higher frequency, which means they're happening more often. So they're more active waves. And so find it in adults concentrating or mentally stressed. Anybody in here think they're exhibiting beta waves? This morning thought they were. Sometimes we do. So concentrating or mentally stressed, we'll have beta waves. Okay, higher frequency, maybe that corresponds with the higher amount of effort cerebrally you're spending on either this higher concentration or this higher stressor event or stress in life. Theta waves, found normally in children. Okay? Now, the theta waves and delta waves both have kind of a little bit of a caveat. So you find them in children or intensely frustrated adults. Have you guys ever seen an adult intensely frustrated? Like throwing an adult tantrum, like screaming and yelling, and like, I've seen it once and it was a little terrifying. I don't know, there's all sorts of levels, but the one person I did see, I was like, do you know I'm in the room? You know I can see you doing this. So intensely frustrated, okay? Not the normal frustration we usually feel, like intensely, irrationally frustrated, okay? Can indicate a disorder in adults, okay? Very normal in kids, not so normal if that hangs around into adulthood, maybe it should get checked out, okay? Then the last one is the delta waves, and these are the ones we do during sleep. So let me ask you the question, how'd you guys sleep last night? Kind of about the same response I got from this morning. I got this. Okay, so we all know sleep's important. Sometimes it's hard to do. I'm hoping you guys will have a good night's rest tonight because I know how important it is. Wouldn't it be awesome if we all slept good tonight? Everyone? Can you imagine what it'd be like tomorrow? Even if you're in the morning lab, if everyone got a good night's rest. Nobody had insomnia. Nobody had a test. Well, that'd be so awesome. I'm sure I'd be incredibly annoying too. Okay, so delta waves during sleep. Or awake adults who have had brain damage. So these last two kind of have those caveats where they're normal in a certain situation, but in another, they're not normal. So please make sure you know the difference there. Okay, I'm just going to erase this. And yes, I am changing the color to red because I do like to match. Okay, now we're going to spend a couple slides talking about the brain's blood supply, because that is very relevant. Okay, so the brain does receive a large amount of blood. Okay, so if you notice here, it receives up to 15 to 20% of the blood pumped by the heart every contraction of the heart. So every time the heart pushes blood out of the ventricles, 15 to 20% goes straight to the brain. Okay? And there are 4 main arteries that do that. You have your 2 internal carotids, and you have your vertebral arteries, right and left vertebral arteries. I am jumping ahead of myself. Okay, so if you have any interruption in the blood supply, even for a fairly short period of time, it can lead to unconsciousness, cell death. So cell death would be leading to brain damage, and then worst would be death. This is because our brain has a very high metabolism. Those neurons are constantly firing. You need a lot of oxygen, a lot of nutrients for the mitochondria that live in those neurons to be able to produce the energy that's necessary for the brain to function. And so they can't live long, those cells, without it. Okay, so it really depends on the oxygen and glucose that's carried in the blood, and it's very essential. Okay, so the arteries that are the most important, internal carotids, as I said, you've got 2 of those, and the vertebral arteries, you got 2 of those. And what is unique about the vertebral arteries is that, well, there's a couple things. First of all, okay, remember when we were learning about our vertebra, bones, last semester? In the cervical region, all vertebrae have, what's the hole in the middle of each vertebra? Would be the vertebral foramen. I'm pretty sure. So then, do you remember the cervical region had 2 holes, one on either side of that? And that was the only place you had those extra holes? Do you remember what they were called? I know, that's asking for something from a while ago. Those holes on the sides. Is it the transverse foramen? It's not the intravertebral because that's in between 2 vertebrae. You might want to double check that. Okay, so anyways, the reason I'm asking that is because those 2 holes on either side of the cervical vertebra, what travels in those holes, so it's very protected by bone, is your vertebral arteries, or are your vertebral arteries. And you can see it in the spinal cord model in the back, shows that. So what's neat, I'll show you about the vertebral arteries on the next slide. Okay. So yes, this is the anterior view here. We're looking at the underside of the brain. This is posterior. We're looking at the inferior view of the brain, sorry. What? Just go away. How do I make that go away? This. I'm sorry, guys. Okay, so this is posterior. So first of all, let's find those arteries that we just mentioned. So first, we said internal carotids. So you can feel your carotids. They become internal when they go up inside. Okay, so we call them external carotids, and then up higher, they're internal. Okay, so here is the entryway. Oh, let me use a different color. Let's see, what will stand out? Maybe green. Here's the port for the one internal carotid. Here's where the other carotid empties, okay? Down here, this is a vertebral artery. This is the other vertebral artery. Something neat that happens is these 2 vertebral arteries actually come together to form a larger artery. That never happens. So I think this may be the only place this happens in the body, because arteries tend to branch and branch and branch and become smaller and smaller. They don't tend to come back together. Okay, the vessels that tend to come together and get larger and larger, those are the veins. So for arteries to come together to form a larger artery is very uncommon. Okay, and so that larger artery that is formed when the 2 vertebral arteries come together is your basilar, or I don't really care how you say it, basilar artery formed by 2 vertebral arteries. Okay, so now what we have is a blood supply here coming from the basilar artery, originally 2 vertebral arteries, and a blood supply here and here from the internal carotids. Okay, now there's 3 little loops I want to point out. Let's see. We have a loop right here, a loop here, and a loop here. And those are what we would call your communicating arteries. So, combined, these communicating arteries, here, here, and here, with the blood supply from the internal carotids and the basilar, form what we call the circle of Willis. Okay, and so this, right here in the middle, you have your pituitary gland hanging down, and then you have your mammillary bodies. What this does is essentially ensures that if there was a blockage in the blood supply to the brain of any of those 4 really important vessels, like let's say for some reason maybe there was my right carotid was severed, but we put pressure on, so I'm going to live. Okay, I'm going to live. So the right carotid's clamped off, so no blood from the right carotid is going to my brain. Well, if we did not have this structure called the circle of Willis, so if we're looking underneath, this is the right, this is the left, okay, blood would not come from one of those vessels. Well, if I don't have blood here to supply, looks like the right half of the temporal lobe, technically speaking, all of the tissue that's supposed to be supplied with that blood will die. But because we have this circle, even if blood isn't coming through here, through this one hole, the right carotid, you have pressure still in the left carotid and your basilar artery that allows you to push the blood all the way around the circle and to the tissue that is not getting the blood supply because that artery is blocked off. So the circle allows you to have a consistent blood flow even if there is a problem with blood getting to the brain with one of the vessels. You are still able to supply blood to the whole brain. And the reason for this, I didn't know that happened. What did I just do? I'm trying to erase, but how did I make it bigger? Okay, there we go. So here's where it's explained about what I just told you. You have the circle of Willis. You need to know the components of the circle of Willis. You have communicating arteries. That's as simple as you need to go. You do not need to go back and say, okay, anterior communicating artery, posterior communicating artery. I don't need that. Just communicating arteries, internal carotids, and the basilar artery, knowing that the basilar artery is made of the combination or the coming together of 2 vertebral arteries. Okay? And so, as I mentioned before, it is a unique structure, this circle of Willis, because arteries usually branch. And because they don't, this again allows blood to flow around the whole circle and supply the blood to the whole brain. So we don't have one part that starts to die because it's not getting blood. So besides having that part of the brain start to not function properly and possibly die, this allows to supply blood to the whole area. And here's why. Nervous tissue is very interconnected and depends on other parts of the brain. If another part of the brain isn't functioning well or at all because it doesn't have blood, then that other part of the brain that relied on it is not going to be able to function well either. So it all starts to shut down, like boom, 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 boom. But if we can keep the blood flowing to the whole brain with the pressure that's left from the rest of the arteries, we can keep the blood flowing and the brain should still be able to function properly. Okay? So if one area works poorly, it will affect the others as well, and they will equally work poorly. And so the key is, as I mentioned before, that the blood pressure is what pushes blood around to the one area where it's not coming through to supply blood so that tissue does not die. Okay? Important key of the circle of Willis. I believe this is our last slide. And it talks a little bit about the blood-brain barrier. If you remember, we talked about blood-brain barrier quite a while ago. We were talking about, excuse me, cell types. There's a specific type of cell that's really important in forming the blood-brain barrier. Those are your astrocytes. Pardon me. And so they have those little processes off of their body that's basically filled with cytoplasm and it's wrapped in its own plasma membrane. So this is kind of like a process sticking off. It's a foot process, and it basically wraps around a capillary. So it's kind of hard to tell. But this, oh, I know. Let's do it in a, how did that happen? Do it in a bright color. So So here, there we go. That is a little snippet of a capillary. It's so hard to find a picture showing astrocytes, but this one is showing the body. So here, that's the cell body. Here's a cell body. Here's a cell body. Notice they have processes that branch over, and they actually wrap themselves around this capillary, creating an extra layer to make permeability even more difficult. Because if you remember, brain matter is very delicate, very fragile, very easily damaged in multiple ways, and the blood-brain barrier helps to prevent toxins from getting in there. Toxins are poisonous things. In addition, with the capillaries, it's made of what we call endothelial cells, and the endothelial cells are held together via tight junctions. And if you remember, tight junctions is like if you had two cell walls, you smeared it with super glue and you smash them together. So there is no way any fluid can pass between the cell walls at all. Okay, it's like an impermeable barrier. Well, in normal capillaries, it's not like that. Usually you have plasma seeping out into the tissue, nutrients and oxygen seeping out, but you don't want it to be that easy because you're trying to control what is going into the brain tissue. So that's why we have astrocytes creating another layer to make it more difficult for substances to pass through, and then you have the actual endothelial cells, which are simple squamous epithelial cells that have tight junctions to prevent leakage. Okay? So those two things combined make it really hard for things to just pass through that the brain or the body doesn't want to pass through. But we do know some substances are able to pass through this blood-brain barrier. And specifically, ones that are able to pass through are small molecules that are lipid soluble. Okay? And so the examples given by the book, nicotine is a big one. And, you know, when you smoke it, it doesn't go down to the stomach and go through the liver first. So it's all just going straight into the bloodstream, straight to the brain. So it's almost like an instantaneous fix for people. Nicotine, ethanol, which is alcohol, heroin is also one that passes the blood-brain barrier. There are others as well. And this morning's class laughed a lot about heroin because like that's a big jump from alcohol. True, but it is an example of something that passes through the blood-brain barrier very easily. Okay? That is the end of our chapter. I will get this posted. Oh, that's the new page. I will get this posted as soon as possible and see you either in lab or in class on Wednesday. Okay? And I have on my list to check attendance. And I'll put up the office